I am just back from CrimeCon Glasgow, which is the sister event to the main CrimeCon event in London, which I attended a few months ago. It was one of the speakers at the Glasgow event that prompted me to cover this case this week. Ann Ming is the mother of Julie Hogg, who came to a tragic end in 1989. The investigation into Julie's disappearance was nothing short of a clusterfuck of massive proportions, leading to a devastating discovery by Ann herself. But Ann's role in the wider story doesn't end there, and I will look at the key role she played in changing the landscape of British law as the video unfolds. She is a remarkable, inspirational woman of indefatigable spirit, and anyone who has the chance to see her speak in person should absolutely take that chance. I could never hope to do this story justice in the way that she can, and I hope only to raise awareness of the impact that this case has had on the British legal system. If you can, make sure you read Ann Ming's phenomenal account of what happened in her book, For the Love of Julie. Now, with that said, let's jump into the tragic case of Julie Hogg. This is Murder of Crows. Julie Hogg was 22 years old in August of 1989, when after just a few years of marriage she separated from her husband Andrew and was therefore living alone with her 3-year-old son Kevin. She was pursuing the separation through legal means and was in the process of putting her life back together, with her absolute priority being her son Kevin. Julie's parents, Ann and Charles Ming, lived nearby and were heavily involved in helping their daughter to make her fresh start. Julie had a night job delivering pizzas and was working a shift on the 15th of November 1989 into the morning of the 16th. Julie's son Kevin was staying with his grandparents. Now, Julie was due to attend a separation hearing later that morning to formalise the separation from her husband. So when Ann Ming did not hear from Julie that morning, she tried to call her daughter, but got no answer. This was very out of character for Julie, So Anne, being a loving mother, wanted to check that nothing was amiss. So she went to Julie's property at 27 Grange Avenue in Billingham with her son and therefore Julie's brother to see if all was well. Getting no answer at the house, they found a way into the property, and while Julie was not around, Anne had the strong feeling that something wasn't quite right. And weirdly, this was because the property was too tidy. Julie was a hard worker and a great mother, but she was known to be a bit disorganized, and her home normally had a lived-in feel to it, which basically means it was generally a bit messy. But on this particular day, it was spotless and extremely tidy. Even the bed had been made, which struck Anne as very, very odd, since Julie never ever made her bed. So even though nothing was strictly amiss as to the property, and there was no smoking gun pointing towards something nefarious having happened to Julie, Anne could not shake the feeling that something was desperately wrong for her not to be around for her son Kevin. She got in touch with the police, who obviously gave the response that all true crime followers expect the police to say. In fact, you're probably saying it to your TV or mobile screen right now. I'm sure we've all accurately guessed one of two answers by now. And just to be total arseholes, the police gave both. To paraphrase, the police said it was too soon to report her missing, and that she was an adult who could leave if she chose to. Sorry, mate. I don't think anyone should ever underestimate a mother's instincts towards their child, especially a mother who was so involved in their child's life as Ann Ming was with Julie Hogg. But the police were unwavering in their stance. Of course, being great and devoted parents, this didn't stop Charles and Anne continuing to contact the police over the following days. And I'm sure you can guess quite how useful the police were in this regard. But after 4 days, perhaps adhering to some internal protocol, or maybe just to stop Charles and Ann Ming from bugging them, the police decided to conduct a full search of Julie's property. Upon doing so and completing what they classed as a full forensic search of the premises, including the use of police dogs, they came up empty, with one police officer quoted as saying, "I can guarantee nothing untoward has happened in that house." Now, on one hand, this was reassuring to the family, even though they were struggling to understand why Julie would have left her son Kevin, whatever her reasons. But she was finally classed as a missing person by the police. Unfortunately, even though the police were now treating Julie's disappearance with some degree of seriousness, no leads, sightings or progress was made in tracking down the young mother. By February of 1990, the police believed that there was no further need to restrict access to Julie's property, so they returned the keys to Julie's estranged husband Andrew, so he could use the property in looking after and raising Kevin. But having moved in, Andrew was concerned that there was a bad smell at the property, so he called Ann Ming to ask her advice. "I'm sure you can guess where this is going, but the reality is traumatizing in the extreme." She came round to the property and they started trying to work out where the source of the smell was. It appeared that the smell was emanating from the bathroom, but it was difficult to pinpoint exactly where. And in trying to investigate the nooks and crannies, Ann Ming nudged the side of the bath, causing the bath panel to become dislodged. Wedged beneath the bath were the significantly decomposed remains of Julie Hogg. Ann Ming had found her daughter after being told there was no way that anything had happened to her in her own home. The ineptitude of the police in this case was nothing short of shocking. In the post-mortem that followed, Julie's body was too decomposed to accurately confirm a cause of death, but what they were able to confirm was sexual mutilation, with a weapon having apparently been inserted into her vagina. Clearly, Julie had been subjected to a prolonged and cruel torture and murder that indicated a significant level of rage. Now that this was a fully fledged murder inquiry, police began to re-examine those closest to Julie, but were soon able to rule out her estranged husband, Andrew. Since the separation, Julie had had a number of flings and short-term relationships, including one with a local man called Billy Dunlop. Oh, you're gonna love Billy Dunlop. Dunlop was a man with a checkered past and a quick temper, so he was quickly on the police radar as possibly having some involvement in Julie's murder. Upon checking his behaviour and location immediately prior to Julie's apparent disappearance, a rather disturbing picture developed. Apparently, Dunlop had been at Billington Rugby Club, near to Julie's home, on the night of the 15th of November. He was reported to have been drinking very heavily, and during a strip show at the club, he became very belligerent and aggressive, and after a fight where the other man was hospitalized, he was ejected from the club. He initially said that he went to a friend's home after leaving the rugby club, but later admitted to going to Julie's home instead. He would say nothing more, but the circumstantial evidence of his location and prior behaviour was very compelling. As a result, he was charged with Julie's murder and would stand trial at Newcastle Crown Court in May of 1991, with him being held on remand at Durham Prison ahead of his trial. The trial actually showed further evidence in the prosecution's case against Dunlop. Julie's house keys, with Dunlop's fingerprints on them, had been found beneath floorboards at Dunlop's home. Semen on a blanket found with Julie's body was found to be Dunlop's, though the defence did try to minimise the impact of some of the evidence by stressing that he had actually been in a recent relationship with Julie, albeit a short one. But it would be fair to say that the defence tried their utmost to create doubt in some of the prosecution's evidence and arguments. It must have worked, at least partially, because the jury were unable to reach a verdict, so the judge ordered a retrial. Unfortunately, however, these doubts persisted, and the retrial went the same way as the first trial, and as before, the jury were unable to reach a verdict, and Dunlop was ultimately acquitted and walked free from court. Now, that could have been a very frustrating and angering end to the story, since the double jeopardy rule prevented a person from being tried again for the same crime. It was one of the fundamental rules of British law and had been in place for around 800 years to prevent defendants from being harassed and hounded incessantly for the same crime. But no one had accounted for the force of nature that was Ann Ming, who would not accept that Dunlop was walking away scot-free. So she decided she would do absolutely everything in her power to make sure Dunlop did not escape justice. And while Ann Ming was embarking on a crusade to see what could be done to address the situation, Dunlop did not change his ways. After his acquittal for Julie's murder, he returned to a life of hard drinking, aggression and anger, especially directed at women. Jane Wadsworth was Dunlop's partner and mother of his children, and after one of Dunlop's many prolonged drinking sessions, he attacked Jane and held her by the throat against a wall and said that he would do it because he had gotten away with it before. Following this, Jane understandably left him. But when he tracked her down, ostensibly to see his children, he sexually assaulted her and would most likely have killed or seriously injured her had one of the children not interrupted them. Jane, of course, decided to go even further away to start a new life. But Dunlop's aggressive behaviour did not end along with his contact with Jane. One night he saw an ex-girlfriend out with a new partner, and that night he broke into her home and attacked the man with a bat, breaking every bone in his face. And as if that wasn't good enough, he then stabbed his ex-girlfriend many times with a barbecue fork. An attempted murder charge was negotiated down to GBH, but he was still convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison. While in prison, Dunlop freely admitted his involvement in Julie's murder, as he felt safe in the knowledge that double jeopardy would prevent him being retried for the same offence again. He was recorded several times taking responsibility for Julie Hogg's death, but he could not be retried for that. Instead, the authorities went down the road of charging him with perjury and lying in court, and he was sentenced to a further 6 years in prison. But he would still not face direct justice for taking Julie's life, or at least not yet, anyway. Because Ann Ming was still taking her fight for justice to the highest levels. She had meetings with successive Home Secretaries in Jack Straw and David Blunkett, who were sympathetic to her plight and supportive of her cause. They both understood and realized that the 800-year-old double jeopardy laws were archaic and in desperate need of updating. And so finally, in 1995, the old double jeopardy laws were scrapped and rewritten, and instead of not allowing the retrying of individuals for the same crime, new rules being adopted meant that people could be retried in the event of new and compelling evidence. You know, say for example, several taped confessions. But while Ann's efforts had seen a massive success, she still had an anxious wait to find out if the new laws allowing quashing of acquittals and demanding retrial would be retrospectively applied. Eventually she got the news that it could be, and in a landmark ruling, Dunlop's acquittal was quashed, and at the retrial in October 2006, Dunlop made a guilty plea. Well, he couldn't really not, given that he'd confessed several times. And he was sentenced to a minimum of 17 years in prison for the murder of Julie Hogg. Now that's not quite where our story today ends. Just last year in 2022, it was revealed that plans were being considered for Dunlop to be moved to an open prison ahead of a possible release. And understandably this sent dismay through Julie's friends and family. In as near to a happy ending as we're going to have today, common sense has prevailed, and just this year all plans for this have been scrapped for reasons of public protection, and Dunlop remains in prison. So that is the story of the murder of Julie Hogg. For a more comprehensive and compelling coverage of this case, please read Ann Ming's book, For the Love of Julie. I also believe there is to be a forthcoming documentary on the case and Ann's accompanying crusade. This video is of course dedicated to Julie Hogg, a young single mother trying to rebuild her life and make a fresh start. And it's also dedicated to her family and friends who grieve her loss to this very day. But I absolutely have to give a special mention to Ann Ming and her tireless efforts to bring justice for her beloved daughter. She is a very special, compassionate woman, and as I said earlier, a real force of nature. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. I'm Steve, star of the show as always. Right here is Samson, and we will see you when we see you.